Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have with me Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, our geopolitical expert, geosecurity expert, our expert chef, and he also fancies himself as an alter ego of Doran, of Fauda. So Abhijit Iyer, Fauda, Mitra, I got my names wrong. Abhijit Iyer, Doran, Mitra, Namaskaram and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskaram to one and all.
Well, Abhijit, I know I'm trying to pull your leg here, but you're such a sport. You never take offense on this. Abhijit, I just want to bring to your attention the recent trip of General Naravane to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and as soon as that happened, the Pakistani television went completely into hyperventilation mode. Everybody was talking endlessly about how the Pakistani influence on Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and most of Middle East was waning, and that there could be some decisive moves that could be made, that India might be suddenly be in charge of maintaining security at the holy shrines of Mecca and Medina, and that Pakistan will have no place, or they all sorts of stuff like doom and gloom. So what do you make of it? What are your channels saying about it?
So, there's two things about this. First is maybe for the first time in their life, the Pakistani press has actually done some independent analysis outside of what the army tells them to do. Second, they're still quite deluded. They seem to think that everybody's a mercenary like them. So let's go back a bit in time. We need to remember that when Pakistan got independent and these countries were, the Gulf states were quite backward. The UAE was still a British colony for about 20 years after Pakistan got independence. And what happened was Pakistan, thanks to Ayub Khan's modernization, had a higher human standard than Saudi Arabia or the UAE or whatever. And even by Islamic State standards, it was a relatively, and relative is a very, very relative term. Uh, it was relatively secular. At least the army had not been completely radicalized. So, and again, when I say radicalized, I use it very uh, relatively speaking. So what happened was that the Saudis, the Emiratis, and all of that, they used the Pakistanis to start up their airline. Emirates in that sense was Gulf Air and Emirates were started up by Pakistanis. I mean, the backbone, the workforce, the pilots, the trainers, and all of that were Pakistani. If you look at Saudi Arabia, the Pakistani military provided the protection to the royal family, especially since King Faisal got assassinated. Because, Faisal was assassinated by his own relative over who was upset at the modernization, the schools for girls, the Mecca mosque siege, and things like that. So, what happens is that they found the Pakistanis to be reliable. Now, ever since Ziaul Haq's Islamization, I mean, further Islamization of Pakistan happens, the radicalization of the army sets in, and especially the rank and file, not so much the generals, but the rank and file get heavily radicalized. And that is when it dawns on Saudi Arabia that Pakistani troops can not be trusted to protect them as much. The warning signs, of course, were things like Salman Taseer getting killed by his own bodyguard, this Benazir Bhutto being bumped off by the army, and things like that. So what happens is that basically uh, the Saudis are uncomfortable, but they're unwilling to take certain steps because they've always believed in a sort of consensual foreign policy in that sense. And then Mohammed bin Salman comes in, and he's just willing to do away with all the old shibboleths. See, he's willing to do cost benefit analysis, like he admitted now this last week that his blockade of Qatar hadn't worked, and he's happily gotten rid of the blockade of Qatar. Right? They've normalized, well, kind of normalized ties. There's still going to be a lot of friction, but it's more or less normalized. And him and the UAE royal family, They then start off a coordinated campaign about 3 years back to start kicking out Pakistanis, or at least make life extremely uncomfortable for them. They start de-recognizing Pakistani professional degrees and they start kicking them out. Why? Because today, if you look at it, Pakistan is much, much more backward mentally and otherwise than Saudi Arabia and the UAE. There's nothing for Pakistan to teach Saudi Arabia and the UAE. There is no human resource that the UAE and Saudi Arabia can't get better from the West that Pakistan can provide. And obviously, Pakistanis are a security risk because the population as a whole is heavily radicalized. Now, there's a second aspect to all of this, which is how pissed off MBS is with Pakistan for constantly lying. The first was Yemen, where they said, Pakistan always said, we will be responsible for your security, we will protect all of you. They never provided troops for anything, right? Especially in Yemen. Egypt was willing to provide, everybody was willing to provide, but not the UAE, for example, thought it was going to be a long drawn out disastrous campaign in private, but they still said, no, alliance is alliance. If Saudi Arabia is going in, we're backing up our friends. Pakistanis did not. They claimed all kinds of this, that, pressure from Iran, this, whatever nonsense, and they didn't go in to attack the Houthis. Number one. Number two, there is an older gripe that Saudi Arabia has, which is in the 1980s, when they bought these CSS-2, these about 2,700 kilometer range ballistic missiles from China, they bought between 50 to 70 of them. They were always led to believe that Pakistan would provide the nuclear warheads because Pakistan had Chinese design nuclear warheads. Pakistan would provide Chinese design nuclear warheads for the Saudis to uh, 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 mate with their Chinese missiles. Clearly, that wasn't going to happen. The Pakistanis simply weren't going to give them those warheads. So there was an accumulation of events that led to it, and Pakistan has nobody but itself to blame. If you notice, the newspapers are blaming somehow Imran Khan, as if it was Imran Khan's premiership that brought it on. It isn't. It's the army's long-term strategy, starting with Ziaul Haq, starting with their unmaintainable nuclear promises, starting with their unmaintainable military intervention promises, didn't work.
Now, why did they not deliver the nuclear warheads?
They were never going to deliver the nuclear warheads. See, the nuclear warheads are Pakistan's crown jewel. It is what makes Pakistan unique in the Muslim world. If anybody thought that Pakistan was simply going to be a rental factory and give out its nuclear warheads to other people, they were gravely mistaken. Right. There was also the thing that if they had started giving out other nuclear warheads, remember, Pakistan is simply a disposable commodity for the 200, 300,000 people who run Pakistan. It's concentrated within about 1,000, 2,000 families, who the father will be, the grandfather will be the chief of army staff, the father will be an industrialist, the son will be a farmer. Right, it works like sort of the Gandhi family out here. Mother is chairman of the UPA, son is property developer. Uh, I don't think Rahul could get admission into the army, but whatever. But that's kind of how it works, right? So they have the nuclear weapons simply to protect interests and to keep Pakistan secure. They themselves don't spend time in Pakistan. Or there is not a single elite family in Pakistan that spends most of its time in Pakistan because Pakistan is living hell. If you're in charge, if you're in control, your pied de terre, so to say, is either in Dubai or somewhere in London or its surrounds, or somewhere in the east coast or San Francisco area. They do not live in Pakistan proper. They come back because that is where their source of income is, their unaccountable source of income, where they need not pay taxes. Think of it as um, it's both the fantasy land as well as the tax haven for the Pakistani rich. So it is both a disposable commodity and an indisposable commodity at the same time. It's very important for the Pakistani elite to maintain their lifestyle this way. If they had gone around gifting nuclear weapons, all those NPT sanctions would have come down on the elite. They wouldn't have survived that, which is why they were never going to give it up.
That makes perfect sense because your wealth is distributed around the world, and in that case, you just cannot afford to make anything. You can't afford to put any wrong foot. Now, when they come into the United States, usually they'll go through this, list. Would they not get caught under the radar for that?
Um, Look, the list is only what you can make of it if you had access to Pakistani financial records, right? So it's very difficult to do that. It requires a complete sustained intelligence effort, A. B, they also saw how their proliferation efforts to Iran, to Libya were all thwarted. So they were already on notice quite often. And them helping out Iran didn't help their case much with Saudi Arabia, because ever since 1979, Saudi Arabia has been completely at loggerheads with Iran. So there's all these issues that keep cropping up with the Saudis, and the Saudis finally decided enough was enough. There was no more emotional baggage, uh, just that.
What you say makes perfect sense because, as far as I know, United States doesn't really look into what is coming into the US by way of money to buy assets in the United States. Like, for example, a significant fraction of the high-end real estate in Manhattan is owned by people from Gulf. I mean, the Saudis or the Qatar, any Qataris, they own practically the best part of real estate in Manhattan. I'm sure they own the same. The same goes for London, perhaps also in any other place which is coveted, right? So they just look at. They
So
don't look at.
basically, the thing
Yeah.
is, like America or Britain, if you have excellent regulatory mechanisms to prevent the investor from market manipulation or money laundering, they have this attitude that, hey, if you're bringing money into America, thank you for your money, please bring it in. It's a very good thing. And that's how any system technically should be. If somebody is bringing money into your country, that's a very good thing, as long as you have the regulatory mechanisms to see to it that it isn't abused or misused.
Correct. Correct. So what you think is you don't attach much significance to this trip of General Naravne.
None. It's just a routine trip. There's nothing great in the works. There's no conspiracy in the works or anything like that. Because remember, whatever we can provide these people with, we seem to think. I've noticed this extraordinarily naive belief in Indians as well, that somehow we can teach the Saudis or the Emiratis about security. Somehow we can build roads for the Iranians, and so on and so forth. I don't think Indians have actually been to Iran and see the kind of roads that the Iranians build. They're far superior to any road I've ever been on in India. And with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, remember, they have more disposable income to buy much better quality expertise from the West than they need from India, right? Much more reliable also. Remember, we're the country that have basically framed and tried an army colonel for Hindu terror. Who's going to trust an army like that? Right. So there are all these issues happening out there, which we need to. We're only slightly less demented. Our press is only slightly less demented than the Pakistani press is.
Present company excluded.
Present company excluded.
All right, that makes me feel much better. Abhijit, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this latest trip of General Naravne. As always, a pleasure to have you on our channel. Viewers, please subscribe to our channel and donate to our cause. We are completely dependent on your good donations to keep these things going. We try to bring you quality programming. Like, for example, Abhijit likes to come to our channel because he knows that if he puts in a word here, it gets heard. It may not get listened, but it at least gets heard, which is more than what he can say for some of the other channels. So we feel good that somewhere something is going good because of us. Thank you, Abhijit, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you, Sri. Well, well, vetri well.